All right, so let's go ahead and talk about, adding rockets and missiles and bullets for my ship here. So what I have is our main drawing screen, right? This is going to be setting up all the mouse movements, any keyboard listeners, the main drawing of all the players and enemies, etc. And then, of course, this is the only file with the setup method, right? The setup method is responsible for constructing all of the objects. Remember, a class is just a blueprint. There are no objects yet, much like how you have a blueprint for a house. It's not it doesn't exist until you actually build it. So this idea of constructing objects is through this line of code. Anytime you do this, you are constructing an object. And of course, whenever you create a class, it's the same thing as saying you are creating a new data type. Let's see, let's keep going here. So I have an enemy class and I have a ship class. I then create them, or I declare them up here, and then create them here. And then of course in the draw method, I have to remember to actually draw them. Some of you guys are forgetting to do that in draw. So when I click play, I have a very basic program here, right? Nothing happening. This guy is moving with my mouse. I can escape this guy, etc. Now I want that guy to shoot at me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new class. This new class is going to be called, what should I call it? I don't know what I should call it. Orb. I guess I'll create an orb class. So I'm going to cheat, right? I know that the orb object will essentially have the same information as your ship. So I'm going to copy this stuff in here and paste it, right? Instead of ship, I will now have a new object called an orb. So my constructor here is going to be different. Instead of this though, I'm going to go ahead and specify what file I'm going to have. So I'm going to add it here. If you want to be able to specify what kind of stuff you want to give to constructors, you got to add it to the parameters. Again, some of this stuff might go over your head, but adding parameters to the constructors allow you to specify very specific things during the construction of that object. That very specific thing is going to be me specifying the file name. So I'm going to use camel casing, so capitalize the starting letter of every other word after the first one, of course. I'm also going to say I'm going to specify the x values and the y value, as well as the velocity in the x and the y. And I'm going to label them too, because some of you guys were getting confused about what I was doing with this keyword. And you know what? It's one of those things where it's really not worth it to talk about at this point because we have such little time. I'm trying to check what my size is for my orb, and then what I called it shot oval, so I can specify that later. And you know what, I actually want a second one. Maybe I'll do that later. All right. So that's that. And so again, nothing has changed other than adding perimeters here, adding perimeters to the constructor. This is called the constructor. That is more of a vocabulary thing, right? A constructor is in charge of setting up all of these instance variables. Oh gosh. I'm getting all these notifications on my screens and it's really, really annoying. Let's see here. Moving on though. So now my orb is actually set up. No, not yet. So here, instead of saying image is equal to load image, look at how I'm specifying the file name there. Instead of specifying it, I'm going to take it from the parameter list. So it's going to be file name. Here, instead of specifying the x at a specific location, right? I'm going to say it's going to come from the parameters. So again, the idea is these parameters are going to be set somewhere else, and they're being passed in as input to this constructor. So the constructor is gonna use those inputs and set them accordingly. My size is gonna be 17 by 17, and then I'm gonna say that you know, I haven't added my vx here in vx vy velocities. So I'm gonna say vx is going to equal whatever was the input to this constructor. Vy is equal to vy2. And so now here though, in draw, rather than strictly drawing, I'm going to update x and y based on the velocities, right? X is changing because there's a velocity in the x. Y is changing if there is a velocity in the y. Again, this is saying update your position based on your speed in that direction. So it makes sense. Great, so now the orb is all good. So let's see how we can add these. So in terms of bullets, what we're actually going to do is, you're going to have more than one enemy. And what we want to do is be able to easily go through all of the bullets that are active on the screen at any given point. And the reason for that is because we want to be able to do collisions with all of these missiles and orbs and bullets, etc., right? We want to know whether or not they are colliding with our ship or any other ship on the screen that may be affected. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create an array list that will be a data structure that can hold all of our orbs. In your case, it might be, some other whatever your theme is, right? So it could be ornaments, it could be kelp, it could be whale vomit, I don't know. So I'm gonna go up here, array list. Array list is now a type, right? Similar to how int is a type, ship is a type, enemy one is a type. An array list is a type. It is a data structure that can hold objects. That's all you need to know. Do not overthink it. And then gonna be all orbs is equal to new array list of orb. So this part right here, I can actually do this in one line, although sometimes I know that I probably do it for you guys in the setup. Whatever works. Let's just simplify your life and keep it here. Some of you guys are getting a little confused. So for now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add an orb doing a mouse press. So mouse pressed. Cannot spell today. Okay. So when I press the mouse, that's when I'm gonna shoot an orb coming from my ship. Shoot an orb from the ship going up the screen, right? So that's very important. You need to know what direction to go, up or down. And then of course we need to know what image file we want to shoot at the ship. From the ship. So the first thing you want to do is you want to construct an orb object. So we are dynamically creating these orbs, right, as we need them. We are not going to create a whole bunch of them and keep them somewhere. We're just gonna create them as we need them. So this is the part that says only create them when you need them, because of course this event is not triggered all the time, right? You're not pressing the mouse button all the time, so therefore this is not running all the time. So it's like on demand type of bullet or orb. So we are gonna go orb new orb is equal to new. Oh, that's gonna confuse some of you. Orb, my orb is equal to new orb, and I'm going to specify the file name. The file name that I want, which of course must exist within your setup. Mine is called where is it? Shotoval.png. So shotoval.png. This is another thing that I'm going to complain about. Some of you guys are keeping your names for files so difficult. Like, stop with those generic names that include parentheses and white space. It's gonna make your life difficult because you're gonna have a typo. I have tons of typos. You know, we are not immune to that. I'm going to specify the orb says, right? Let's go back to this class. This says whenever you create an orb, you need to specify the x and y for that orb and the velocity in the x and y for the orb. Why? Well, you're creating an orb, you need to specify where, and you need to specify in which direction it needs to go. So that's exactly why these parameters are required, right? In a very high level sense. That's why we're adding them there. Just trust me. So then I'm going to say, okay, it's going to come from my ship, and my ship is called player. Remember, but the dot operator is a constructor, it's an operator that's valid anytime you now have an object. So a player is an object, an enemy is an object. So I have a dot operator. I want to also ask the ship where its y is, and then I want this to only strictly go up the screen. So that means that the velocity in the x direction side to side should be 0. And since we're going up, some of you guys are still getting confused. When you go up, you are becoming more negative, right? So I'm going to say -4. You know what? -7, just because. All right, so this will create a new orb. I want to add that orb to my container. All orbs that add, and then the name of the variable. So we're not done yet. What we're going to do is we're going to go here and we're going to draw the orbs, right? So it says visit all entries in the data structure and draw them. So this loop you will use all the time. So we're going to for every orb in my data structure called all orbs. There you go. That's it. So it's going to visit every single orb within this data structure. Remember, this structure can contain more than one. Could be a billion. Actually, I don't know if it can contain a billion. But let's be reasonable. Could be like 500. Could be 200. Whatever. So then we're going to go this orb, that draw. Alright, let's hope I've done this properly. If not, it's gonna be very embarrassing when I click play. Because you know, I'm perfect and I don't make mistakes. Just kidding. Just so happened that I was perfect there. But not always the case, trust me. Okay, so there you go. We're done. Our ship can shoot. Take a look at where it's getting shot at though, right? It's not centered. That's for you to figure out when I'm grading your stuff. I'm going to see if it looks weird. Mine, maybe it doesn't look weird. Maybe I do have shotguns on the left hand side, not shotguns, whatever you call them. But so now the question is, what if I wanted my ship, this guy, to be shooting orbs going down, right? So this is where the fun comes, when the enemies can actually shoot back. So we're gonna go over here, the enemy. We know that the enemy is moving down the screen, and we also know that the enemy must shoot down. And so what we're going to do is, we know the draw for the enemy is getting called roughly 60 times per second. And so what I'm going to do is, you know, maybe every, so if it's roughly 60 times per second, we're going to say, you know, every 17 milliseconds, it's getting called. So I'm going to start a counter over here. I'm going to do counter is equal to 0. Every single time I call the draw method, I'm going to increment counter by 17. And then you know what I'm going to check? I'm going to check, hey, has it been 500 milliseconds? If it has, I'm going to shoot a projectile. So I'm going to go if counter well, this might be weird. Well, I guess I can just... so I'm going to go if counter is greater than or equal to 500. I'm going to reset counter to 0. And then I'm going to go all orbs dot add. So we're going to create a new orb. But to make my life easier, I'm going to copy this one over here. And just alter it. Because, you know, that's... we're lazy. I'm lazy. I'm not going to type that all again. But instead of a negative Vy, I want it to go down the screen, which means it must be a positive Y. So then I'm going to do my orb. Here it's not player, it's going to be these variables for the enemy. So I'm going to go... so if you're referring to those ones, it should be X and then should be Y. You know what? I don't want to use this keyword because some of you will be confused and you don't have enough knowledge or enough room in your minds. You guys are smart and all, but too much information, you know what I mean? Alright, so there you go. So now, when I click play, every 500 milliseconds, that thing is shooting at me. Like, how rude. Boom, boom, boom. Right? So now we can start getting behaviors for our enemies. Again, that thing is shooting 500 every 500 milliseconds. If I wanted to slow it down, or if I wanted to make it faster, I can make this smaller to like every 200 milliseconds. Alright, so now it's a little overpowered, and that's not cool for level 0. So yeah, so there you go. I'm gonna slow it down to 1000. Okay, just kidding. Of course, the fun part is going to be collision, which you guys will have to figure out. We will have discussion, but if we've done Pong collision, right? We have done it. That was with a rectangle and a circle. You guys were able to do it. You should be able to do it and apply it in this game, right? Collision detection is not something that you reinvent every single time you create a game. A lot of the concepts are doable, reusable, etc. So there you go. That's what we have. However, the one last thing, right? If I wanted to change what type of projectile is being created by my ship, by my enemy, I mean, I can change this right here. So I'm going to say, what if this enemy actually shot, sent a copy of itself at me? It's going to look silly, right? Oh my gosh, what is happening? How is it spawning ships at me? Again, we were able to do that strictly because of this, right? The reason I told you that you want to specify the file name is so that you can get this granularity. Oh gosh, I cannot speak. And so that's it. Gracias. How do I stop this recording?